whoever's not here can just watch the recording. Yes, hello. My name is Kayla Grant. I am an alumna of Clark Atlanta University as of December 2020, and I'll be hosting slash moderating this Zoom session. So I'm going to read your bio out now so people can get more knowledge on who you are.
Okay.
Mr. Kevin Cottrell Jr. is a Clark Atlanta University alumnus who obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree in Mass Media Arts in 2004. Over the past 16 years, Kevin has worked in radio, TV, print media. The experienced practitioner's career launched as he served as an obituary and zone writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, while starting the Red Zone magazine, which is a publication dedicated to covering the best prep to pro football players. In 2008, he joined Turner Sports to head up NBA TV's research department, supporting a wide range of on-air talent from the legendary Ahmed, Ahmed Rashid to Hall of Famer Isaiah Thomas. In 2013, Kevin secured his master's degree in sports management from Drexel University and created NBA TV's Fan Night virtual tournament, one of the company's largest social media initiatives. Currently, Kevin manages multiple duties at the network as NBA TV associate producer. I'm so sorry. As NBA TV's associate producer. Since the fall of 2017, Mr. Cottrell served as an adjunct professor in the Mass Media Arts Department and most recently published his first book titled Ball Don't Lie. Also, he's a longtime member of the National Association of Black Journalists. So, guys, let's give a little nice, warm CAU hand clap welcome to Mr. Cottrell.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So we're going to get started with this first question. What song or movie would you use to describe your life during the pandemic and why?
Wow, that's a great first question. The song Started From the Bottom that we hear. You know, the pandemic started. Who knew what was going to be going on? You thought every day was just like the bottom. Like, okay, it can't get no worse than this. And then just start figuring out ways to actually just push through and make it out. And actually, during the pandemic is when I was able to publish my book. So I started using that lack of, I guess, things to do, that downtime, just kind of rechannel my energy. As for a movie, wow, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what movie I'd use. That's a good question. Probably The Program. That's one of my favorite movies, football movie. Just trying to reprogram myself, or just get with the program, so to speak, the new way of things. Throughout the whole shutdown, we just kept saying, in a couple of weeks, it'll be back to normal. We'll be back outside. But it became a thing where it's more so like, no, this is the new way, a living, new way of doing things. And I guess throughout that time, I just kind of had to reprogram myself and learn how to live with COVID.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of COVID, this pandemic has been seen as a hindrance by many. How has the pandemic really affected you in which ways, and how did you kind of cope with that?
Yeah, with NBA TV, I traveled on a weekly basis. Um, so when the pandemic hit, I want to say that the March 12th, the NBA shut down. March 10th, I was actually traveling from Denver. And on that flight back, I kind of knew there was a chance I wasn't going to make the next trip. We kind of got that sense being around the league. I think we got a memo that was saying we couldn't go into the locker room, and we had to like stay 6 feet away from the players, but nothing had happened too crazy. So I knew at that point, I was like, okay. So being around the game every week to all of a sudden the game being totally snatched away was kind of crazy. And also teaching, like moving online. It wasn't just the students that struggled with the transition. As a professor, that was a big struggle for me. I fed off the energy of the students most of the time, was able to improvise a little bit with conversations, current events, and applying that with, I guess, whatever the lecture was for the week. So all that being snatched away was pretty tough. And coping with it was just something we just had no other choice to do but learn. But it was not easy at all.
Mm-hmm. So how were you able to stay motivated during these times, and like how did you find your creativity, your sources of creativity during this like time we're all trapped inside?
I don't know. I guess sometimes you just kind of get over being on social media or consuming, whatever. You can only binge watch so many shows, and then after a while, an idea will kind of spark up, or you kind of explore some things, or maybe read something, or just, whether know how big, no matter how small it was. After a while, it just everything kind of had an expiration date.
Mhm.
And for me, my passion has always been writing. And so whether it was, okay, how am I going to roll this book out? How am I going to do promote it? I came up with my own like promotional rollout, and I just kind of like start going around the house, finding items around the house, going outside, taking different pictures of the book. I did a Father's Day promo. I did all kind of things. And so my creativity I just kind of poured my energy back into the book, and getting the word out on social media. Yeah.
So let's go all the way to the beginning. How did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in journalism?
It's funny you asked that, because I'm one of the people that I say kind of blessed early on. I knew at a very early age.
Mm.
I'm from Chicago originally, and during the '90s, Michael Jordan and the Bulls they just ran everything in our city, and I was just kind of enamored with their whole just being. And I knew basketball wasn't something that I could achieve at that highest level, so I kind of started taking a liking to all the journalists that were covering the game. And Ahmad Rashad, who I was eventually able to work with, he hosted NBA Inside Stuff, and that was like one of my favorite shows. And that kind of grabbed me first. And I kind of watched how he did things. Then I started reading newspapers more and more after the game the next day. And from that point on, I'd say 11 years old, 12 years old, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So what I started doing was I would watch a game, and I would actually write an article, what I thought was an article, based on what I saw and based on what the player said after the game. I might have like read it to my grandmother, tossed it away. But for me, that was like my first dabble in, okay, this is something I want to do. The high school newspaper, working at the Panther, and the rest is just history.
So speaking of the Panther, let's get into it. Let's talk about your experience at Clark
Yeah.
Atlanta University. What are some of the things that you did there that helped you become successful in your career?
One thing I did there is, I guess I think I learned the importance of collaboration. My good friend Cecil Cross second was the sports editor at the time, um, and he just a peer of mine, just to kind of challenge me to kind of meet his ideas, and like, yo, let's kind of venture out. Let's not just sit on campus and do things. Let's actually leave campus and interview people off campus. He was able to get an internship, I believe, at the Seattle Times, walk 9 holes of Tiger Woods. And so for me, that was like my first, like, okay, barometer, my first like measuring stick. Like, okay, this is what I'm gonna measure up to. And we just was able to collaborate with different ideas. And together we launched Look Magazine, which was his magazine. And then later Red Zone we did together. And I don't know, I think coming up, I always just thought me, and I'm gonna do me. And working at the Panther was probably that first taste of true collaboration. And to this day, he's somebody that, if I have a creative idea, especially if it's something that has to do with writing, I'll call him up and be like, yo, what you think about this idea? Let's collaborate. How can we take it to the next level?
So in what ways would you say that mentorship kind of helped you and contributed to your success and helped you kind of maneuver throughout the media industry?
Yeah, mentorship is something that, comes in a myriad of ways. If my first set of mentorship was probably just my professors, just being God honest. I had professors that I started out, I thought I wanted to maybe act. I thought I wanted to just do straight TV on air. And I had a professor that was like, yeah, you too, Chicago. Your twang, you got to fix that. And she would take me into the studio, and like after classes were all done, the studio was clear, and she would have me just read the prompter and would have me work on my diction, work on how I pronounce certain things, my ARs, things like that. And that was the first time I think I saw somebody that actually cared about me and was like, okay, this is things that I should probably be working on. And from there, I just started learning how to actually seek out mentors as well. If I saw somebody was doing something that interests me, then I seek them out and like, try to spark a conversation. There's no true art to being a mentee or finding a mentor or being a mentor. But just along the way, it started with different professors that, Professor Bentley, who's back in the department, that was probably one of my first mentors. Brian Jenkins, a lot of people may fear going in, talking to him. I used to go sit in his office all the time and wreck his brain. And he would just always challenge me on why sports, why sports, why sports, why not weather? Why don't you want to do the weather? Things like that. He kind of actually got me to think outside the box, even though sports has always been my love and focus. So it started there, and then once you got in the industry, and I started actually having work for people to read over, then it was easier to be like, hey, I got this article or some a portfolio. Do you mind reading over it and let me know? And then from there, you kind of establish, different mentors here and there. But mentors come from a lot of different areas. So that was just something that I've always had and never stopped considering those people.
Mhm. So, what were some of the struggles that you faced early on as a journalist that helped you get where you are now?
I, Honestly, the biggest struggle was internships. I could not get the sexy internship. All my friends were, getting paid on internships. Their internships were turning into their first job out of college, and I wasn't getting any of those. That's probably when my creativity really started, and I really started, challenging myself to do my own thing. And as a result, going back to my friend Cecil, his first job was at Slam, not first job, one of his first jobs was at Slam magazine. And I remember I could not get in Slam. And we had another friend, Jonathan Landrum, who's now writing for Associated Press, who's also at Clark with us. He got on at Slam. I'm like, yo, why can't I get on at Slam? So I contacted the lady, the editor, and she was like, I already got multiple people in Atlanta. I don't need another one. And I started writing a blog. And so from there, I wrote a blog every Thursday. I called it Thoughtful Thursdays. And I wrote this blog for 10 consecutive years. And what I did was I just started out with a thought of the week. And my thought had nothing to do with sports. It was whatever was going on in the world. I would put a sports slant on it. And then I would just take what was going on in sports for that week, like a capsule almost. I would break it all down and I would just blast it out to friends, family, coworkers, whoever had an email address that they would give me. And that became my viewers. They became my subscribers. That was my first articles, column, I should say, magazine. And it got to the point where I would have weeks where I just didn't feel like doing it. And people would email me like, yo, where's the blog? I read this on my lunch break. So that taught me how to, stick to deadlines because every Thursday I had to have this done. And I actually did not stop writing this blog until I started my book. So I just went and I kept going, and those failures just kind of fueled me to say, you know what? Maybe you're not that good of a writer. Maybe you need to sharpen your pen. And then that's what I kind of turned it into.
Professor Daniel always be telling us to practice your writing, so that's really awesome.
Always. Yeah,
um,
always. You can always get better at writing.
yeah. So tell us about your experience working for the Atlanta Journal Constitution.
Yeah, so funny enough, the Atlanta Journal Constitution, I only got in because of Cecil. So this is why I speak so highly of collaboration and getting to know your peers. Cecil got a promotion and they was looking for somebody to take his job. And I want to say I had like a not regular 9 to 5 at the time. And I had just got let go from that 9 to 5. And Cecil called me. I was like, you want my job? It's part-time, but newspaper. I'm like, bet. You don't know what the job was. I get in, it's obituaries. Um, and so I'm writing obituaries, and that's like where I started out doing the obituary list. And it's probably one of the most important jobs I ever had because that taught me attention to detail. This is the last time these people will ever be mentioned in life. You want to get their name right, the way you spell it. You want to get their age right, the city they're from, the high school they went to, whatever they feel is important. You want to get those things correct. And then when I got in there, you know, that was just one of those things that I kind of turned into more than a, well, I will say before I move on at the AJC, my first big article was James Brown. He died while I was at work. And I want to say I was the only person there because it was a holiday. It was like Christmas Eve. You can Google to see if I remember this correctly, but I believe it was at Christmas Eve. He was at Piedmont Hospital. He was there to get his teeth cleaned. That's it. He was just there to get his teeth cleaned. He found out he had pneumonia. Gets in there, they don't let him out, and he didn't make it out. He ended up passing away. I get the phone call. I was the first to write it, and so for me, I was like, oh wow, okay, this is James Brown, and it ended up working out. It built up my confidence. Wrote more. I started out, I could never make deadline. I would probably miss deadline by like 2 hours because I was just so overwhelmed by everything. And then from there, I started getting creative. I'm like, okay, I want to be a sports writer. So I started pitching stories that had a sports slant. And one of the first stories I did was a firewoman. She was a boxer and she was training for the Olympics. So it was a human interest story. So I went out to go get a story on this creative boxer, but I was really doing a sports story. And every week I ended up doing that. I found a women's football league. I found some more things. I think it was the Negro League Museum went mobile and they was coming through Atlanta. That was another article. By the time I was ready shot myself out of the AJC. I was telling people I was a sports writer. Even though it wasn't true, I actually had the sports writing portfolio to back what I was doing. And so I always just, sticking to my guns, being creative. The AJC only giving me, a little bit of an inch, but I had a byline and I just took that and ran with it.
So there are so many lanes that you can go into in the journalism career as a whole. One of them being like just entrepreneurship. So what inspired you to launch Red Zone magazine?
Yeah. So, and working with my friend on his magazine, again, sports was all I wanted to do. His was a lot more lifestyle and entertainment. When I couldn't get on at Slam, as I mentioned earlier, it almost became McDowell's versus McDonald's. And so what I did was I sat down and I took Slam magazine and I went through it page by page. And I said, whatever they do, I'm going to do the football version. And my magazine was literally that. They had Slam. I was trying to come to one word. Gridiron was maybe hash mark. Like I had all these different things. I was like, they got one word, I got one word. And it was the best football players from preps to pros. I got it somewhere. I had Reggie Bush was on the cover. This was 2006. Reggie Bush was coming out of the draft, went to the NFL draft. Terrell Owens had just joined the Dallas Cowboys. Got Terrell Owens to be the centerpiece of the article. Had all of these great people, but I wasn't thinking forward enough. At this point, it was more online. Apps were starting to be developed, and I was still thinking print. And the print industry was slowly but surely starting to shift. I wouldn't say die, but it was starting to shift. And I was able to get that edition out, but after that, I just didn't have the wherewithal or the vision to see, hey, this need to be more technologically driven. But that's what got it in there. I just wanted to make sure I had an outlet to write about sports.
So, given everything that is happening around the world and in the Black community, how have you been able to prioritize your mental health and just self care in general?
Knowing when to unplug. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't ignore everything, right? But you also can't be impulsive and run on social media and yell with all caps. So sometimes, I try to take things in. I always try to do my best to read beyond the headline. I strongly suggest that to students, please read beyond the headline, whatever it is you're trying to do. Things like that is what I would do. I don't know, to just kind of see every angle of something so I wouldn't overreact, underreact. And then, I would just maybe talk to my friends. I have a group chat with 5 friends I went to Clark with, and we're still close. We all from Chicago. So I can vent and talk to my friends before I, go elsewhere and do things. But, just having like-minded individuals to bounce things off of has helped. Also being able to just say, you know what, I'm not going to watch this, or I've seen enough. George Floyd was obviously the height of 2020. I think when my friend sent me the video, I didn't know what I was about to watch. And somehow, way or another, I just couldn't turn away from it. And then after that, when more things started coming out, I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm good on that. Being a Black man in America, when you're driving, the moment you see a cop car, you kind of freeze up. That's trauma enough. I don't want to add to it. So I don't know, just picking and choosing when to unplug was probably the best thing for me.
So, as young journalists coming out of college that may not get their dream job right after they graduate, what is some advice would you tell them as they're working toward that goal?
Yeah, just keep pushing, but overall, keep creating. It took me 4 years to get on at NBA TV. And then when I got an NBA TV, it probably took me another 3, 4 years before I decided to go get my master's. You're gonna always want to evolve. Anybody that tells you they got their dream job out of college is lying. We all think we know what we want to do, and we might get to do it, and then we'll be exhausted with it. I had another peer of mine that graduated from Clark in '04, went straight into the corporate America, ascended, executive status, and then one day was just like, you know what, I really want to be a photographer. I'm done with this. He's 28 years old. He's at the top of his career. Sky's the limit. He could probably get the CEO status one day at a company. He just decided he didn't want to do that. And so it's okay. It's okay. Not everybody's going to get out, especially the people that, they're, enamored with being the next Oprah, the next Stuart Scott. Those people started small too. I worked at radio. I co-hosted a radio show with Rose Scott and on 1380 WAOK. And she allowed me to come in every day, 5 days a week from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., talk sports, find my voice, figure out how to create a rundown on the show. It was free, but it was the best opportunity I ever had. And so things like that are going to come along. You just have to decide what is it you're most passionate about, and you'll stop at nothing until you get there.
So let's head up to like when you got your master's degree and that decision behind doing that. So as journalists, we are often told that we don't need a master's degree in order to pursue our goals. So what inspired you to go to graduate school and how has it helped your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a person, I'm a strong proponent of you not needing a master's for journalism school. That's just me. That's from my experience. I legit don't know one person with a master's in journalism that was like, this got me X amount of more money in salary. It just typically doesn't matter in our field. Experience does. So when I got my master's, it was not in journalism. It was in sports management because at that point, when I started out, when I left Clark, my goal was to be on air. Okay. When I got to Clark and I started in my journalism courses, and we had all said, they say, introduce yourself, tell us your major and your concentration. And I'd say, my major is mass media arts, my concentration is ESPN. I've been offered a job 3 times at ESPN, turned it down all 3 times. Things change. So I can see if some people wanted to go and get their master's because their discipline changed. If I all of a sudden decided I wanted to work in public relations, it might have been something I delved into. I didn't know what public relations was when I was in college. I had no clue what PR was. So for me, I went in sports management because I started becoming more interested in the business of sports. And I just thought, all my years in the NBA that one day I could possibly transition to go work for a pro franchise or maybe a brand like Nike, Gatorade. And I didn't want my production background to hinder me. And so I just like, you know what? If I have a master's in sports management, maybe that comes in handy. I'm not so sure it was the best thing, but it allows me to teach. And I wouldn't trade that. So, at the end of the day, it's one of those things you have to be sure about. And I strongly suggest people go into the field before they decide to go get a master's.
So let's talk about your career at Turner Sports. How have you been able to grow in your career at Turner Sports while creating content such as the NBA TV Fan Night virtual tournament?
Thank you. I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna be totally honest. It's not easy. This field is competitive, and I like to say people don't retire; they die. So people are not looking to be replaced. They're not looking to give their spots up. So for me, I would just have to be reactive, like proactive, but more so reactive. I'll give you an example. What the Fan Night virtual tournament was, this is still at the early stages of Twitter, maybe 2010, when Twitter was becoming a thing, but it wasn't big. And Dwayne Wade and James Harden, they were kind of going back and forth in media about who the best shooting guard was. I'm in a meeting reading this on Twitter, and in my mind, I go, it'd be crazy if they can just play one-on-one and decide. And then that was my idea, one-on-one tournament. So then I sat there, I'm in a meeting. I sat there and I said, who are the 16 best one-on-one players in the NBA? Steph Curry, Durant, LeBron, all these people. So what I ended up doing was I just wrote out a bracket on a piece of paper. And then by the end of the meeting, I tell my boss, I'm like, we should do a virtual one-on-one tournament, allow the fans to vote. We get this engagement, get them coming back every week, and it helps, it gets us attention. They were like, bet. I pitched it, we got graphics, it blew up. And it got to the point where players were like, yo, Kev, why you got me going against such and such in the first round? It got that big. And so that's an example of me having an idea. It may sound crazy, but I flushed it out and believed in the idea, and they didn't have a choice but to kind of get behind it. Sometimes they might see me like, here you go with another idea. But I want to say we did 3 of those. We did one-on-one, the best duos of all time, the best teams of all time. So we did 3 years in a row. And it got to the first one, that's all I wanted to do. And they were like, okay, give us another one. And then give us another one. And then from there, I just started pitching more ideas. And that's kind of how I rolled into more field producing. But from there, it just became, I just showed them what I could do. And they would just throw more at me. And the opportunity just never really stopped. And then sometimes I would have to speak up like, hey, y'all know I can do such and such. It could be competitive at times, but a lot of people can also get very comfortable and complacent. So you cannot be viewed as their comfortable person. Nobody's gonna give you anything. It's almost like the squeaky wheel gets the oil kind of deal. That's how it is in this field because it's just that competitive.
So, with all of your accomplishments, who has influenced you today to become who you are?
Wow. I don't know. That's probably my family, like my grandmother and my mom. My grandmother was actually the person that encouraged me to do a book, and that was like actually while I was at Clark, I had a history project, and we were supposed to do like a creative version of a family tree. And since I was a journalist, I was like, you know what, I'll write a book. So I turned my family tree into a small book, and I interviewed each and every one of my family members alone with nobody around, so I can get everything, um, you know, unsolicited, unprovoked kind of deal. And it was like these different chapters to tell my story of how my ancestors came and ended with me kind of deal. And from there, she just kept saying, "Man, that was just such a beautiful story you told about the family. You should write a book." And I'm like, "I'll never write a book." And when I started getting the itch to, sorry, I want to write a book, it kind of came back to my mind. I don't want to write about myself. So what am I going to write about? And then that's how I got the idea to do the book. So, my family just encouraging me all the time from a kid is just probably why I say I'd accomplish everything. Cause I've always had the self-confidence that whatever I put my mind to, I could do. I believe that from an early age.
So, knowing all of what you know now, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self personally and professionally?
I don't measure yourself against your peers, first of all. That was probably my first struggle. I mean, I had friends that bought a house before we walked across the stage. I was like, man, what y'all got going on? They got advances. A lot of times, especially in our department, we have friends in the business school and we'll see what they have going on and be like, yo, but it's a totally different field. It's apples to oranges. You can't compare it. And you just have to understand what you're about to embark on. It's a much more uh, roll your sleeves up kind of field. Like to me, this is the most blue collar, white collar field we have because it's not a lot of glory. It's kind of thankless. A lot of people think you're doing something cool and you might be looking at it like, yeah, but it ain't that cool or it ain't paying me what I thought I was going to be getting paid kind of deal. Which is why so many people you kind of come in contact with as professionals do multiple things. And also be patient and keep creating. Um, Never stop creating. That's probably the number one thing I'd say. Never stop creating because you don't know what your own idea could go into. You can end up at a job and they're saying, "Hey, we're looking for ideas." An idea you had 5 years ago, you can kind of refresh it, dust it off. Boom, it's ready to go. I still have ideas for things that I've never launched that I don't talk about until I get the opportunity, to actually pitch it and do so. So, those are the things that I would say. Don't measure yourself against your peers. Be patient; it's gonna come, but also just remain creative at all times.
So, when you got rejected from an opportunity, how did you use that to fuel you into other projects and ventures?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Slam Magazine was probably the biggest rejection that I can remember. Um, any other time, I literally just didn't get a job. I actually saved my Slam email like, yo, I can't believe she turned me down. And so I would just look at that every day until I developed that magazine idea. But the blog is also what I like to say, just kind of came from that. At work too, at work, I maybe get rejected on different things and I just turn around and say, that's okay. Nobody's gonna outwork me. Nobody's gonna see things the way I see them. And I would just allow that to just continue fueling me. I know I'm gonna have a vision that nobody else can see. I'm gonna observe and hear things that nobody else can hear. And that's just something that, rejection, that's what it does to me. I just keep looking for the next thing.
So, what are some things that you learned about the industry that was not taught in school?
That college didn't help.
No, that wasn't taught in school in general. So, like things that you
Oh,
learned that wasn't taught in school.
to be honest, just all the different jobs. I feel like, and it's something that I try to do in class, I try to just make students research random jobs. I really do honestly feel like if I knew what PR was in college, I would have probably changed to PR. And the reason why I say that is because I just knew I loved to write, But I didn't know PR was another field that all you do is write and tell stories and represent brands. I kind of pigeonholed myself because the one thing about sports I want people to understand is if you go for an interview tomorrow and they ask you, do you like sports? You'll say, oh yeah, I like sports. So, you know, hockey? What about volleyball? What about badminton? What about polo? Nah, nah, nah. But you said you like sports. Well, I really only like basketball. Do you like college? You like high school basketball? You like NBA? I really only like NBA. Okay, now you know. So I really narrowed myself to I really only like NBA, NFL. So I really put myself in a position that was all I could work on. But in journalism. But if I wanted to do PR, oh man, now I could do PR for Gatorade. I could do PR for NFL, the league, 32 teams. You know, it opens up all the different things I can do. But writing as a journalist, you know, in sports, you know, kind of I pigeonhole myself that way. So the one thing I would say I just did not know is just all the array of opportunities and jobs that they have in the field of journalism as a whole. Sometimes we take that J word and we only think writing, but it just covers so much.
So what are your hopes for the future of journalism?
My hopes for the future of journalism is, you know, is for one, that long form doesn't completely die. I do have a prediction that I think long form writing is going to just be solely on social. So I strongly recommend a lot of students, if you're not familiar with Twitter and Twitter threads, it's something you really need to get adapted to. By the time you all are the next 3-4 years in fields, I really believe writing articles won't live on a page per se on the internet. It'll be a Twitter thread. It's gonna be something a lot quicker, something that allows people to stay on a social media site and not jump off, which means you're gonna have to become a more concise writer. You're gonna have to learn how to write tighter because now you're limited by characters even more so than being in an article with space. But I just hope that, you know, it's something that just doesn't die because journalism is so important. You know, we're the rough draft to history. Anytime somebody says, oh, this is what happened in 9/11, if you Google it, you're going to see articles first. That's the first thing you're going to always see. So I just hope that, you know, no matter what, that journalism as in print form, it doesn't just become somebody yelling on a podcast or a quick video or whatever, that, you know, print, research, stats, data, all of these things to fact check, cross fact check, this just doesn't die.
Awesome. Thank you so much. On behalf of NABJ, I would like to thank you for coming to speak with us today. That is all the questions that we had. Darian, did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself. How you doing, Mr. Cottrell? My name is Darian Carter, the president of NABJ at Clark-Lang University and the co-sports editor of the student newspaper at CAU. I just want to say thank you for taking your time out doing this. I know you may have a busy schedule, so I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to thank you for coming to speak because I had a couple interviews during this past 2 weeks with Warner Media at different positions with Turner Sports. So hearing your insight on things such as graduate school, I really appreciate it, and it really helped me today.
No problem, man. You got thanks for having me. Anytime you guys need anything, you know, feel free to reach out. I'm around.
No doubt. Thank you.
Thank you.